The question landed on him like a quiet thunderclap, simple on the surface but heavy enough to bend the air between them. It wasn't asked in anger or teasing, but with a softness that made his chest tighten before his mind could catch up. In that small office washed in late afternoon light, surrounded by the hum of computers and the faint smell of burnt coffee, a single dad found himself facing a truth he had spent years carefully folding away. Some questions don't just ask for an answer. They open a door you've been leaning against with your whole weight. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who keep going even when life breaks them, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. He was the kind of man people overlooked, not because he lacked presence, but because he carried himself like someone who didn't want to be seen. His clothes were always clean but worn, his shoes polished but old, his eyes alert yet distant. Every morning he arrived early, and every evening he left just in time to pick up his daughter from the after-school program. He never joined coworkers for drinks, never lingered in the break room, never talked about weekends or vacations. To most, he was dependable, quiet, invisible. To himself, he was surviving. Years earlier, life had cracked open in a way he never expected. His wife's illness came fast and cruel, stripping color from their world day by day. Hospital rooms replaced family dinners, whispered prayers replaced laughter, and promises were made in the quiet hours that would never be tested. When she was gone, he didn't just lose a partner, he lost the future he had planned, the version of himself he thought he would become. What remained was a little girl with his eyes and her smile, and a responsibility so heavy it left no room for grief to breathe. Single fatherhood wasn't something he eased into, it dropped on him like a storm. There were nights when exhaustion blurred his vision and mornings when fear sat in his stomach like a stone. He learned to braid hair with trembling hands, to pack lunches that felt like love folded into paper bags, to smile through school meetings even when his heart ached. Dating, romance, even the idea of companionship became distant concepts, like cities he once visited but could no longer afford to return to. At work, his boss noticed him long before she understood him. She was sharp, driven, and known for her high standards, but beneath that was a quiet attentiveness few people saw. She noticed how he stayed late without being asked, how he never complained, how he flinched slightly when coworkers joked about dating apps or weekend getaways. She noticed the picture on his desk, a little girl in a yellow dress holding a handmade sign that said, "Best Dad Ever." And she noticed something else, too, the loneliness that sat on him like a second shadow. The day she asked the question wasn't planned. It slipped out between conversations about deadlines and budgets, in a rare moment of stillness. She didn't expect the air to change, didn't expect his shoulders to stiffen or his eyes to lower, as if he were suddenly much older. When he answered, he didn't do it defensively or dramatically. He spoke the truth the way someone does when they're tired of carrying it alone. He explained that dating felt like a luxury he couldn't justify, that every spare moment belonged to his daughter, and every ounce of emotional energy was already spent making sure she felt safe, loved, and whole. He explained that loving someone again felt dangerous, like inviting loss back into a house that had barely been rebuilt. He explained that his heart wasn't closed, just guarded by memories that still bled if pressed too hard. And somewhere in those words was a quiet admission that broke something open in her. She had expected excuses. What she heard was devotion edged with pain. A man who had chosen responsibility over healing, duty over desire, and who believed that sacrifice was the same thing as strength. It wasn't dramatic, but it was devastating in its honesty. She saw, in that moment, how deeply alone he had been, not because he lacked opportunities, but because he believed he didn't deserve them. From that day on, something shifted, not in obvious ways, but in small human ones. She found herself asking about his daughter more often, not out of politeness, but genuine curiosity. She adjusted meeting times so he could leave earlier. She listened more carefully when he spoke, noticed the way his voice softened when he talked about bedtime stories or school projects, and he, in turn, began to notice her too, not just as a boss, but as a person who cared enough to see him. Still, the walls around his heart didn't fall easily. Years of grief had taught him to be cautious, to measure Joe. Why carefully? Because it could be taken without warning. He told himself that closeness was a risk he couldn't afford, that stability for his daughter mattered more than his own happiness. Yet, late at night, after the house was quiet and the dishes were done, he sometimes wondered what it would feel like to share the weight again. Life has a way of testing the stories we tell ourselves. When his daughter fell ill one winter and he had to juggle hospital visits with work deadlines, it was his boss who quietly stepped in. She rearranged schedules, covered meetings, and never once made him feel like a burden. When he apologized for the inconvenience, she reminded him that being human was not a weakness. That kindness wasn't something you earned. It was something you offered. Those moments began to chip away at the armor he wore so faithfully. He started to realize that strength didn't always look like endurance. Sometimes it looked like letting someone stand beside you. Sometimes it looked like admitting you were tired. The fear didn't vanish, but it softened, losing its sharpest edges. For her, the struggle was different, but just as real. She had built her life around independence, believing that control was the safest form of security. Seeing his vulnerability challenged that belief. It reminded her that love wasn't a transaction or a distraction, but a shared risk. She didn't want to push him, didn't want to become another weight he had to carry, but she also couldn't ignore the quiet connection growing between them, the unspoken understanding that filled the spaces where words failed. The turning point came not with a grand gesture, but with a simple realization. One evening, after a long day, he watched his daughter fall asleep clutching a book he had read to her countless times. Her breathing was steady, peaceful, trusting. In that moment he understood that the world he had rebuilt wasn't as fragile as he feared, that loving again wouldn't erase the past or diminish his devotion as a father. It would simply add another chapter. When he finally allowed himself to imagine a future that included more than survival, it scared him. But it also felt like hope. He didn't suddenly become fearless. He didn't forget his loss, but he began to believe that his heart, though scarred, was still capable of warmth. Near the end of this story, if it has touched your heart in any way, we gently ask you to like the video, share it with someone who might need encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who feel unseen. And before the final moments, we have a special request for you. Please comment below with a single word or sentence that describes how this story made you feel. Your words matter more than you know. In the end, the question that started it all didn't demand an answer anymore. It had already done its work. It revealed the quiet heroism of a single father who chose love over ease, and the compassion of a woman who saw strength not as perfection, but as honesty. Their story wasn't about romance alone. It was about healing, patience, and the courage to believe that life could offer more than one chance at happiness. Some hearts break loudly, others break in silence, and keep going anyway. And sometimes, all it takes is one sincere question to remind someone that they are still worthy of love, still allowed to hope, and still human enough to begin again.